Hey guys, today we're going to talk about some different math properties that are coming up in our math book. These should be kind of familiar already from last year, so let's kind of go over them. All right, so the first properties that we're going to talk about are the commutative properties. Okay, so I want you kind of to think about the word commute. So a lot of your parents commute to work. So commute kind of means to go to work and then come back to work. Okay, so commutative is actually kind of just, another word for it is kind of just like switching. So if I just want to show you here an example. So the commutative property of addition, this first one here. Okay, it says that when you add two or more numbers together, the order doesn't matter. So think you can just kind of switch it around, just like when you're driving to work. So I could say this, if you look here, 2 plus 7, that is the same as 7 plus 2. We know that. We know when you're adding, the order doesn't matter. So that's called the commutative property of addition. That means you can flip it in either order, doesn't matter. So here's another example. You could say A plus B. That's the same as adding it the opposite way, B plus A. Doesn't matter the order. Okay, now another property that works for is multiplication. And again, we kind of know that the order doesn't matter in multiplication. So if you look here, 3 times 5, I know that's the same as 5 times 3. Okay, so that's, again, the commutative property because the order doesn't matter. So here's another example. I can do A times B. That's the same as B times A. Doesn't matter what order you multiply it. Okay, now you guys should know this. Do you guys think subtraction is commutative? What about division? Well, let's look at this example right here. It says 7 minus 2. Well, I know 7, take away 2 is 5. So I'll just go write that above there. Okay, and then, it says 2 minus 7. Well, that's negative 5. So I don't get the same answer. So division is not, or subtraction is not commutative. Now we also have division. If I did 50 divided by 10, well, I know that's 5. But if I reverse it and do 10 divided by 50, that's not going to give me 5. That's actually going to give me a decimal, 0.2. Those are not equal. Remember, that's what that little symbol means? Right there? That means not, that means not equal. Okay, so this is pretty important. Division and subtraction, you cannot, or they're not commutative. You cannot flip them around. So again, the only ones that are commutative are adding, okay, and multiplying, because you can just flip the order. So that is the commutative property. All right, another property that we are going to talk about is called the associative property. All right, so the associative property of addition says that when you add 3 or more numbers, so this is working with when you have more than 2 numbers. So when you have a bunch of numbers together, it just tells you that grouping is not important. So again, it kind of doesn't matter the order. So let's kind of look at this first one here. Let's come over here. So if you look, I have 5 plus 2 and then plus 6. And here they did 5 plus 2 first, which is 7. So I'll just kind of write that out. And then plus the 6 would give me 13. Okay, over here, you might notice that it's the exact same numbers. There's a 5, 2, and 6. But this time they did 2 plus 6 together, which is 8. And then they added 5, which would give me 13. So I got the same answer either way, but it didn't matter what order I went in. Okay, so associative property of addition means that it doesn't matter what order you group in, because it's adding. It's not going to matter. You're going to get the same answer either way. All right, then we also have the associative property of multiplication. It's kind of the same exact thing. Okay, so if you kind of look, they did 5 times 2 first, and we got 10. And then times 6 is 60. Okay, on the other side, they did 2 times 6 first, which is 12. And then times 5, which is also 60. So we got the same thing both times. They just grouped what they did first differently. But you still got the same answer. All right, so those we just saw equal each other. Now, subtraction and division, they are not associative. Okay, and you guys know why, because it does matter the order you subtract and divide. Okay, so when you're subtracting and dividing, the order matters no matter how you group it, so those would not be associative. Two more properties that we are going to be learning about are called the identity properties. Okay, and again, those work with addition and multiplication. These are pretty easy. Okay, all they are, okay, is it says if I add 0 to a number, I get the same thing. So for example, it says 6 plus 0. Well, I'm always going to get 6. When I add 0 to anything, you're going to get the exact same number. So here, a plus 0, you're still just going to have a because you're adding nothing to it. So the identity property, again, just kind of means the number keeps its same identity, if you think of it like that. Like the a, it's still going to be a. The 6, it's still going to be 6. It keeps its identity. Now for multiplication, this says that multiplying any number by 1 gives you the same thing. So you have to think, like, if I'm multiplying something, what can I times it by so that it keeps its same identity? So if I think about 5, what can I times it by so that it keeps its same identity and it stays 5? Well, I can times it by 1. Same thing, I could say, what about 7? What could I times it by so that it keeps its identity of 7? Well, again, you can times it by 1. So the identity property of multiplying says that if you multiply by 1, you're still going to get the same answer. And the last two properties that we are going to be talking about are called inverse properties. Now, if you hear the word inverse, that kind of means, another word for inverse is like opposite. Okay, so this first one is called the additive inverse property. Okay, so here's what it means. It states that for every number, there is an opposite number that you can add to it that will give you 0. So here's basically what this property says. It says if I have a number and I take its inverse, which means opposite. So think 3 plus, well, the opposite is negative 3. I'm always going to get 0. So all that means, again, is if you add, and it kind of says it, the inverse is you're going to get 0. So think again, if I'm adding 4 and then taking its inverse, which means opposite, I'm always going to get 0. So that's if you're adding inverses. Now, if you're multiplying inverses, that's this other one down here. If you multiply inverses, you're going to get something else. So let's think 6. So the inverse of 6 is actually it's actually called a reciprocal. We've learned that last year. Reciprocal is like if you take this number and you flip it. So 6 over 1, that's the same as 1/6. Okay, and if you multiply those, let's see what we get. Well, 6 times, we'll go straight across. 6 times 1 is 6, and 1 times 6 is 6, which 6 over 6 is the same as 1. So this property says if I multiply two numbers that are reciprocals, I'm always going to get 1. So again, let's think if I said 5. Okay, and if I times that by the reciprocal, that means I kind of just have to flip it. I'm going to get 5 over 5, which is the same as 1. All right, so again, this property says if you multiply the reciprocals, or the inverse, you get 1. So those are the inverse properties. All right, so those are the properties we're going to be using this year. If you need to review any of them, you can always come back to this video.